Good. Well, it's been about 4 years now since we did our original sort of podcast sort of interview. We've kept in touch in that since. Um, but you've just published a new book, China in the New World, and why companies need to be incorporating China into their global plans, if that's the right sort of title and context. So is that right? Is that the reason why you published your new book?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, the book just came out a couple of weeks ago. It's book. Actually, it consists of two parts. The first part is a somewhat of a summary or a chronicle of what I've been doing in China since the early 90s. So it's been over 30 years now, and some of my experiences or my observations, uh, especially from a standpoint of me working with a lot of multinational companies along the way, and also increasingly with Chinese companies. In
Yeah.
chapter four of the first part of the book, I try to explain the reason why I believe that China was able to grow and able to exhibit high level of resilience. And I try to explain why that was the case, that is the case and will be the case actually going forward. And second part, half of the book, I talk about what I think the future will look like and what ought to be the strategy for companies going forward in terms of thinking about China, and not China only as a market, but also as a source of capital, innovations, business model, and ultimately the impact for the rest of the world. So that's essentially is my book, Andrew.
Great. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. And I guess to put it into context of where I come at it from this, and maybe we could explore it. Yeah, I've been traveling back and forth to China for 24, 25 years, sort of something like that, sort of from early sort of 2000. And where I'm working now in the rise of sort of AI and these sort of new technology and devices, I've sort of seen the speed of change in China over that sort of time. Um, and it'd be great to understand the context now, because really putting it in, I suppose, a Western perspective, we've seen the rise of the internet, from the 90s and the revolution that caused in the early 2000s, while I guess China was sort of catching up, um, and coming from a very low level base in terms of industry and sort of stuff like that through the 70s and 80s and into the 90s, right? But now China, with its power of electric vehicles, battery technologies, AI, robotics, and sort of stuff like that, I get the feeling that China's going to be the place where the next wave of AI is going to happen. So, can you put a bit more context into that in terms of what you've seen over that period and that as well?
Yeah, Andrew, I think you touch on probably the most important topic now these days when I go out and talk to my clients, i.e., the corporate executives in China, about what are the areas of the most concerns. And AI and technology innovation inevitably always comes up as at the top. Uh, I think it goes without saying that today the US and China are very much in a race on AI development, which I think is have caught attentions from the rest of the world. But I think what's happening in China equally, if not more important, is the AI is in China, the Chinese are leveraging AI for applications into various business scenarios. And that is a very big topic now these days, and is not only being caught by the enterprises themselves, but also the Chinese government uh, at the central level have also recognized that this is an important trend for China going forward. So in China, we usually call this AI plus, in other words, applications of AI. So the hardcore AI that a lot of people talks about, like the large language model development, the most advanced semiconductor chips, those kinds of things. Certainly, China is moving very fast, but the US is also moving very fast. Both are, in a way, neck to neck, right? But on AI applications, I think China is really at a very unusual position because it has already built a large range of industries, in particular in manufacturing, which you're
Yeah.
very familiar with, Andrew. So I think that is an area that is really getting a lot of attention in China these days.
Yeah, and I think that manufacturing base and that whole supply chain thing I've experienced myself, and that within China. So I started a business, one of my businesses back around 2011, and I tried to get the products sort of manufactured in the UK and really couldn't at an effective cost. And the closest I could get it manufactured was effectively Turkey, but then the key components were coming from China anyway. And I ended up getting the product manufactured in Guangdong because over a weekend, from a Friday through to a Monday, they were able to take my design, manufacture it, and three companies gave me prototypes on the Monday morning, and that was relatively low tech. And I've been with my corporate clients for doing electronic devices going back 7, 8 years ago, and you visit the suppliers there in China, in China, in that the in that Shenzhen sort of area, and they say, oh yeah, we can get the best Bluetooth, we can get the best Wi-Fi antennas, we can get the best screens, all within a short area to be able to create these devices. So if we now layer on top of that, as we sort of said, artificial intelligence, which can see and calculate and do tasks like an agent, then that all comes together in one place, right? And if you come up with an idea in the West, which is what I'm seeing lots of startups, my immediate response to them is, well, are you looking at the Chinese supply chain to be able to manufacture and create these, or are you seeing a competitor coming from there? So, you know, how do you see Western companies should collaborate? Because I think I've moved beyond the thing of can we compete now. How do you see that Western companies can collaborate and that with China to be able to um, build new businesses and leverage these technologies?
Yeah, I think the paradigm certainly has been changing very fast. For a long time, foreign companies think of China as the place, a potential market or a real market, also as a place to do manufacturing, leveraging a supply chain and so on. So, you can say it is more from the west to the east, right? So, companies coming from west and going to the east. That has been the case for the last several decades. I think while that is continues to be the case for many companies, but some company has come to China, tried the Chinese market and maybe even the Chinese supply chain, and sometimes they didn't have the best experience or the result. And some have withdrawn from China or reduced their scale in China and so on. So I think while China continues to be important part of a market or even a supply chain source for a lot of Western companies. What's equally maybe more important that is happening is that the other way is happening very fast. In other words, the Chinese manufacturers and the Chinese ecosystems, supply ecosystems, are actually going outside of China in a very fast manner.
Mm.
And I think, Andrew, you know that the Chinese call this going overseas, right? Or going from where they are now and they go to overseas. And a lot of the manufacturers they go not only by themselves, they actually carry along with them the supply ecosystems because there's many manufacturing, it's not just one company making one thing. It's actually many companies coming together to supply to the main manufacturer who ultimately make that product, right?
Okay.
That's the scale and the complexity of Chinese manufacturing, particularly in the so-called high-tech manufacturing, right? So that ecosystem is very mobile and very flexible. And as the manufacturers going outside of China, the suppliers will also go along as well. So I think what you described, from the west to the east continues to be the case for many companies. But at the same time, we're also seeing Chinese companies or Western companies going from China outside of China. So sort of going from China back to the West or from China to the rest of the world, in particular, the global South countries. I think this dynamic development is anchoring China more and more as the global epicenter for manufacturing supply chains.
Okay, yeah, no, interesting perspective. Because so I think building on that, then, so what my point is about the West or the United Kingdom, where I'm based,
Mhm. Sure.
um, trying to, if the UK government tries to create that whole supply chain ecosystem, I think is going to be
Mhm.
far too costly and it's going to fail. But if
Mhm.
I'm an entrepreneur which believes that they can create a business and a new service, say in
Mhm.
automotive or in health diagnostics or in consumer products, which has got AI sort of in the middle of it, then what I'm taking from you is maybe we try and partner with a Chinese company that typically makes that sort of device in China and get them to come to the UK and say, well, be our partner now for Europe, be our partner for the West or whatever like that. Because
Mhm.
yeah, it's a good perspective you're giving that that could then bring the ecosystem here rather than and we could learn and gain the knowledge and that from that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think there will be a lot of mutual learnings. The Chinese companies also they going outside of China in waves, while there are companies who have more experience of going overseas already, like the likes of Huawei or SAIC, which is an leading auto company in China and so
Yeah,
on. Many other companies are still at a relatively early stage of exploring the international expedition, right?
yeah,
So for many of those companies, they are not as familiar, about the overseas market, including the European market and
yeah.
including the UK market. They actually would need a lot of help locally. So I think you're right. The thinking that in fact by working together you can actually create perhaps a more mutually beneficial situation. I think that thought is very beneficial for both the UK companies as well for Chinese companies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I suppose a perspective I had going back about 8 or 9 years ago now. I visited a few factories in Hangzhou with a good friend of mine who was one of the key people with Jack Ma in Alibaba, and we went to visit a few factories. And one of them we went to, it struck me that they were very good at producing electric motorbikes, mopeds, and at a very low cost. And when I asked them about, well, what's the difference between the cost that you're able to manufacture here and the price that they end up selling for, outside in Europe, they didn't understand what the difference was sort of within that price. And for me, that was an example of maybe
Mm.
Chinese companies have been very good at the manufacturing and the sort of supply, but their understanding of marketing and of branding and positioning and stuff like that has been behind. Now that's going back a number of years, and I'm seeing the likes of BYD now and becoming excellent in their branding and positioning. But do you still feel that a lot of Chinese companies are behind the curve in that understanding of the branding and marketing, but they've been excellent in the supply chain side?
Yeah, certainly, there's a large number of companies in China by definition, right? Some are more mature, some are larger, but many of them are still in the stage of fast development. So that curve is a wide curve, and the standard deviation is actually pretty wide, right? The top end is very very mature and very sophisticated,
Yeah.
But I think mean and also, anything that's below the mean, still there's a lot of work to do. So I think the target companies for UK companies to try to work with would be those kind of companies. Companies who have a lot of potential, very good in what they're doing, but maybe they're not at that sophisticated stage yet.
Yeah.
Time will come and they will learn very quickly. They can either learn by themselves or they learn it through some other means and so on. But I think, it will be also opportunity for the right kind of UK companies to identify the right kind of targets so that, you can create good collaboration partnership.
Yeah. 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 I suppose another topic or perspective that I sort of got is if we maybe look at different technology waves or different sort of stages of technology, I suppose sort of old world technologies, internal combustion engine cars, for example, you know, China never really took off on that because the West dominated, and there's a new wave of technology coming with electric vehicles. And I think, Tesla was maybe one of the leaders, but China's now caught up. I suppose there was another perspective that I saw in China was with electronic money, QR codes, WeChats, Alipay, where the West already had credit cards, but China going back 20 plus years ago, the banking system and that sort of change wasn't as embedded, but China created a new wave of micropayments with WeChat and Alipay and QR codes, which a lot of people in the West, when I came back from China, going back those years ago, I was showing people QR codes and they would go, oh, we don't know how to use them. What are they for?
Sure.
Then it was only during the pandemic when we all had to use QR codes with our phones to check in and check out of places, the West switched on to that technology. So we've got the old technology, we've got China has caught up and has applied technology has been available to everybody. And I'm just thinking the next wave where large language models, artificial intelligence, and the next wave of embedded AI into all seeing, all hearing devices and robots. And I don't just mean humanoid robots, I mean things that are autonomous, autonomous vehicles, autonomous devices around the home, manufacturing, and sort of stuff like that. That is going to be new to us all. And I just wonder whether China is now, or which countries or which businesses are going to be the ones that are going to be able to take advantage of that the most. Do you think?
What the examples that you talk about are examples of what we just talked about earlier, which is AI plus. In other words, applying AI technology in the specific scenarios. So robotics and that's a clear application scenario, and I think in many ways China is in the lead of that, and we're going to see more and more applications of robotics in different situations, sometimes in the, to B situation, like in manufacturing, and sometimes in to C. I think we're going to see more and more the use of robots within household situations, as an example, right?
Yeah.
So I think from that standpoint, we're seeing that we're also seeing the application of AI into healthcare related situations like in pharmaceuticals. I think China has proven that the leveraging of technology, in particular AI, is enabling the Chinese to have a much more high probability and a much faster speed of identifying new drugs. China is really at the cutting edge of that.
Mm.
And I think the other area would be like advanced medical devices, where robotics and AI will become much more prevalent going forward. Um, and also in retail and anything that's related to consumers. So those kind of areas, I think we're going to see many more innovations coming out from the Chinese companies. And as you said, they would also begin to export their models. Either it's in the form of a product or in the form of the business models and so on, or supply chain. They will export that outside of China, and eventually, or very quickly, they will get to Europe, including to the UK. So I think that will be highly, highly probable. I think you also touch on another point, which I think is an area that a lot of people have not fully understood the implications. You talk about the use of auto payments like digital payments like Alipay and WeChat Pay, that kind of stuff. That has proven to be a very powerful tool, as you know. But I think what China is now doing is encouraging or getting into another phase of fintech innovations, which goes beyond this payment gateways. Uh, China through Hong Kong, China is now trying to develop its own stable coins and also the so-called RWA, the real world asset uh, approach. And within the mainland China, China is also trying to promote more of the central bank digital currency, right? The ECNY. I
Right.
think all these are very important developments because um, I think it's going to incentivize more of the use of the renminbi as a trading currency on the international basis, and also the development of an alternative international settlement system alongside with the shift system, which is the incumbent system.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think as that part of the new financial system is being built, we're probably going to see a new configuration of supply chain because cash flow or payment is a big part of supply chain. And before, China was not able to have any control over that because it's entirely based on the shift system and the US
right.
dollars. But I think China is now trying to create an alternative system, which that definitely will not replace shift, but it could be a small alternative to the shift system.
Yeah,
Uh, Basing on China's strength, huge strength in the physical goods flow and also in digital information flow, I think the completion of the cash flow in the supply chain, which is centered around China, will have significant implications on how global supply chain is going to be configured.
yeah,
So I think that's also another areas that is worth many companies to pay attention to, because I think when the new form of supply chain will emerge, we're probably going to see a lot of shift in in the use of supply chain and also the movement of the supply chain from China to the rest of the world.
yeah. No, that's a fascinating thought. Actually, I hadn't thought about it that way because um, I'm involved with quite a powerful group of people that are doing leading edge stuff on the AI. And one of the debates we've
Mm,
been having recently is, well, what's the new business model in this space, right? Because
mm,
software we used to sell on a per user basis, which was a human.
mm.
Well, how many people have you got in your organization and how many seats are we going to charge you per month for? And the AI large language model sort of type approach and AI agents changes that considerably.
Yes,
And if you've got new devices which are AI driven and the agents and the AI are talking to each other, then
yes,
there is going to be a different payment system. And you can't do
yes,
that with credit cards and you can't do that with Swift sort of type system.
yes.
So fascinating. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. And I haven't had that debate or discussion with anybody in the West. None of us has had that sort of discussion. There's only been there's I suppose the only bit has been about crypto and Bitcoin and that's me personally has always been discredited for me. That's those sort of schemes of thinking you could capture value, but a digital means of transaction, and as you said, stablecoin, real world sort of type assets, is a much more application and practical approach to it, which to me, as you said, I think is a Chinese way of practical, let's solve a problem and get on with it, rather than a social media, how can we do a new sort of scheme type way, which is maybe a different perspective on how things are done. Yeah,
Yeah, I think different countries that evolve their development in a different ways, right? So, I think in particular, the US have chosen the way to, develop as the way that you talk about. I think especially in large language models, I think the US has made a lot of advances. In particular, recently, with Gemini 3 coming out from Google,
Yeah,
they are fantastic. But at the same time, LLM is only part of the future world, right? It is a very important foundation model, but it's only a part of the future world. We still need other parts, in particular, the
yeah,
real applications to really take advantage of the foundational model for the benefits of the humanity. So if you look at it from a more holistic standpoint, the Chinese approach is not only driving the foundational models, like the high core LLMs, but it's also thinking a lot about the applications. So I think from that standpoint, one need to, this is my recommendation in my book, is that, if you are a CEO of a global companies, no longer China is only a market because people talk about China is a huge market and you cannot afford not to be in China for decades. But some companies say, we tried China, we were not successful. So don't tell me I need to be in China again. But for many companies, of course, still very important. But I think my view is that even if you try China, you're not successful in China, and you retract back to where you were before or what you are today, but China is coming to you. China is
yeah,
coming to you, sometimes as competitor, sometimes as a fact of life, because they become the standards for the world, at
yeah,
least in certain aspects. And sometimes they could be your friends, your collaborators. It's a matter of how you think about China and the Chinese companies. And it's really, what I try to say in my new book is that, you need to put China at the core of your global plans because you cannot really escape China. You
yeah.
cannot block China. China is coming to you in the ways that, is always inevitable, right, going forward.
Yeah, no, I very much agree, Edward. So it's been great to catch up with you, and I would certainly recommend that book, and I would recommend your previous books as well about China disruptors to understand some of these businesses which have grown up in China and are coming out and reflecting back on how we've seen the changes over the decades and what fantastic changes we're going to see in the coming years. So thank you very much for sharing with us.
Thank you, Andrew. It's always nice to catch up with you, and I enjoy the conversations as always.